Oh, wow. This has a lot more stuff in it than the previous times we've linked. Tons of notebooks. A viewer. Huh. Let me take a look at that again. It just seems like another part of the city. Nothing in particular. Oh no. I do not want a helmet like that. I'm in my maintainer suit. I'm never gonna wear anything else. So Sam wrote this. Sam rules. Okay. King Rinaref. I wonder if he was one of the first kings? King Rinaref. Rinaref was born in 207 BE before Earth. Oh, right. Because I think Earth is an age in and of itself, one that Denis had written. On Gardernay. He was accepted into the Guild of Writers at the age of 5. A standard age. Oh, it's not la. But 5? Really? And as the years passed, quickly became one of the finest writers that René had ever seen. Certain records go as far as stating that Rinaref was unsurpassed in skill by any other writer of the day. By the time he was 90, Rinaref had achieved the rank of Guildmaster and was well on his way to become the Grandmaster. Now, 90 is only about, I would say, maybe your 30s. Because the Denis can live up to almost 400 years. I think the oldest known Denis was nearly 400. Okay, had achieved the rank of Guildmaster and was well on his way to become the Grandmaster. However, due to personal convictions, he never achieved that rank. Rinaref had long been a challenger of views of the Guild of Writers, as well as the king himself. Rinaref was apparently very concerned with society's views pertaining to the purpose of writing and the challenge of acting responsibly with the great gift given to us by Yahvo. Huh, Yahvo. Is Yahvo like their god, maybe? Like Yahweh? Maybe. Around 73 BE, Rinaref was, this is a different handwriting by the way, was asked by the Grandmaster to write a descriptive book to a questionable age, at least in the eyes of Rinaref. He perceived the age being used to house an uncivilized race that could be used for the purposes of the René. Thus, Rinaref refused to carry out the command from his Grandmaster and, after much debating, was apparently dismissed from the Guild of Writers. Oh, so they were wanting to create slaves for themselves, but he refused. Some records do point to Rinaref willingly excusing himself from the guild, although regardless of how he left, much of society found the dismissal unfair and even went so far as to call it detrimental to society. Around 59 BE, the fact that Gardernay would not be able to serve the René as home for much longer was confirmed and the information made public. Rinaref had long known of the state of Gardernay and from the time of his dismissal had apparently been working on an age that he felt would be a good place to live for those who wished to follow him. According to various journals, Rinaref managed to attract a few thousand René and convince them to follow him in the ways that he felt important, and to the age that he had written. The king allowed Rinaref to split away from the René, along with a few of other smaller groups, while the majority of the René left Gardernay to a new home world called Tirahni. Rinaref took his group to Earth, where he established the Denis, meaning new beginning. Rinaref was a strong leader, immediately establishing himself as king and reigning for 120 years until his death. Obviously, those who followed Rinaref to Denis already respected him enough to separate themselves from their family and friends, and thus records point to very few debates on or disagreements within their society under the reign of Rinaref. As had always been the case with the René, a group of surveyors was sent to Denis before the group officially moved there to establish the Great Zero and the line emanating from it. A monument was built in the Great Zero in the year 0 DE. Unlike previous occasions, Rinaref established the line of the Great Zero as set apart for holy buildings. Without authorization by the reigning king, construction was forbidden. Though it's never stated directly, records strongly imply that it was Rinaref who chose where the city would be established. he seemed to base his decision on two factors, which probably made the decision an easy one. First was the line of the Great Zero. It seemed an obvious spot to base the city, with the most important religious structures being directly in the line of the rest of the city surrounding a center. The second factor was a group of waterfalls that flowed from the ceiling of the cavern into the area adjacent to the line of the Great Zero. The fresh water was perfect for drinking. A new Writers' Guild, with fairly different rules than the one that had existed in Gardene, was constructed almost immediately in 8 DE under the direction of Rinaref. By the year 100 DE, Rinaref had directed the recreation of 18 major guilds. The guilds were dedicated to Yafo on the Day of the Circle, a celebration not only for the completion of the major guilds, but a celebration of the new guilds, which Rinaref believed were healthier than those that existed in Gardene. Guilds that had been established to please Yafo and not themselves, Rinaref had said. Certain records point to the guilds in Gardene becoming extremely competitive with one another and focusing more on having the best facility than carrying out their duty to Yafo and the people. In an effort to curb that kind of competition, Rinaref implemented a list of restrictions upon guild construction. The restrictions included guidelines pertaining to the placement facing the Great Zero, size, shape, and minor visual guidelines. Though one of Rinaref's top priorities was construction of the temple, there were disagreements as to specifics, causing numerous delays in the finalization of construction plans. Eventually, construction was started in 48 DE, and the temple was completed in 63 DE, known as the Regal Tavorum? The Temple of Yavo was meant to be a place of worship, as well as a reminder of the prophesied great king who would come to them soon. Rinaref also made it a priority to install massive fans that would supply the cavern with fresh air. Natural openings existed, but it was quickly discovered that they did not supply ample circulation for the cavern. As a result, massive shafts and fans were built and installed over a 30-year period between 84 and 114 DE. It should be noted that numerous records point to a small group of Dini disappearing upon completion of the fans. It is most often assumed that they remained on the surface of Earth to live. So it's very possible that Dini and humans intermingled a long time ago. Throughout his reign, records point to multiple occasions in which Rinaref refused to build a palace for himself. Instead, he lived in a fairly basic home, similar in fashion to most of his fellow citizens, and made it especially clear that until Yavo had a new home, he would not allow himself one, so until the temple was built. Although, even after the temple was completed, Rinaref refused to build a palace, always focusing more on the religious and government sites. Rinaref's own philosophy centered on the fact that it was much easier to focus on Yafo and his wishes than circumstances were difficult and struggles more abundant. It was strongly believed that Rinaref's refusal to build a palace was an expression of that philosophy. In 120 DE, Rinaref died of apparent heart complications. He was 327 years old. Though he had married, he left no children, and as a result, he chose one of his apprentices, named Ailesh, to succeed him. Taken from the Memoirs of Ailesh. From the Oath of the New Guild of Writers, written by Rinaref. Taken from the journals of the Grand Master Najun of the Guild of Legislators. Oh, so that's where the little stars are. Gardene's sun was dying and would eventually cause rapid decrease in temperature, making it an uninhabitable age. Oh, so it was like a red star. The Great Zero itself was usually based on a prominent natural landmark within an age. From the Great Zero, a line was drawn, usually towards the magnetic north, to aid in navigation, construction, etc. It should be noted that the 18 major guilds of Dini were not necessarily the same as the 18 that had existed on Gardene. In fact, they were probably much different. Though there is no information that details the major guilds of Gardene, we do know that the guilds were meant to be flexible and serve the purpose of the people in the needs of their time. Okay, so it's like cycling out the old for new guilds. Taken from a transcript of Rinaref's speech in the first day of the circle. The prophetical work of the Regal Tavor of Orpa, a book Rinaref believed strongly in, dealt with numerous prophecies of a great king who would be sent to Yavo to guide the people. Oh wait, we have those 5 books from the Path of the Shell expansion. The Regal, yeah, that's the Orpa that I kept looking at. Interesting. We'll have to read more of that one. The Stone Hammers. Interesting. Intro to Meaning DRC. King Demath took the throne in 4692 DE at the age of 154. Oh, so these are one's previous kings. Though the public was generally not happy with the reign of G, it appears as though they were pleased with his choices of Demath to succeed him. Oh wait, maybe I want to read this book first. King Shama. Yeah, maybe. Wait, that one looks different. Well, I suppose I'll read this one first. Okay. Demath had joined the Guild of Maintainers at the age of 5, as most did, and risen to the level of Guildmaster by the time he was chosen as king. The selection was a surprise to much of the public, and apparently even to Demath himself. It was not a post that he had especially desired to have. Almost immediately, Demath ordered a ban on all unnecessary links to be enforced by the Maintainers, while the council carried out emergency meetings trying to decide their stance on the outsiders. Who's the outsiders? In these meetings, the council concluded that relations with the outsiders would continue, but with much stricter restrictions and guidelines. The list was long that Demath signed into law and included the restriction of any outsiders operating Denis machinery or linking books. Perhaps more importantly, the council and king sent a clear message to all of the factions that were against outsider involvement with Denis. Their ideas would not be tolerated if they led to any infraction of the rules previously established by Lo Shamanesh, which were to become strictly enforced. And though it was not stated publicly, the Rali Yama, meaning the unseen, was apparently ordered to double its membership and find any and all who were carrying out illegal activities with the outsiders. So the Rali Yama, maybe they're like assassins or spies, that's why they're the unseen. So they report to the king about illicit activities. As well, Demath denounced the words of the Watcher as pure rubbish and nothing more than a desperately lonely man seeking attention. Oh, the Watcher was the writer of the blue books that we had in our Relto. He was the one that had been receiving 5 sentences, 5 lines at a time from the Maker, and he was writing them down and he was blind. But this is interesting. So there are people that thought that his prophecies were rubbish. In 4721 DE, Demath pushed an amendment that forced the major guilds to accept a percentage of students who passed all entrance exams but could not afford the steep prices. Oh, that's like, college acceptance and stuff. It was the first such action in the history of Denis, and one that many seemed to question, especially the guilds themselves. However, Demath was able to convince them that it was a necessity for society, and one to which they cautiously agreed. Maybe back in those days, wealth meant more. In 4724 DE, records point to over 10 separate groups being convicted of the Lo Shamanesh laws, as they had come to be called. Most agree that the Rali-Ima played a large role in the convictions, although there are no official records of their involvement. Regardless, each of the convicted was sentenced to solitary confinement on prison ages. The convictions must have carried a powerful impact on society, as the public still knew very little of the Relima, if anything at all, and thus had no idea how so many convictions were occurring. As one writer said, there were stories of dark shadows and mysterious creatures. For those carrying out such activities, it was said that the eyes of the Demath saw everything while his arms took anyone he wanted. The Relima. Maybe those are the Baharo? Maybe they were enslaved or somehow used by the Denis? I don't know. The crime rate, especially pertaining to the Lo Shamanesh laws, steadily lowered until 4752 when there were only 3 recorded convictions. In 4784 DE, an assassination attempt was carried out on Demath, resulting in the death of 2 members of the Relima, who saved Damath's life in the process. The perpetrators were found, and 2 years later, Damath ordered their execution. It was the first execution of its kind and met with little resistance from the public or council. The two men were apparently linked into a death age, permanently ending their lives. Ooh, so is it like an unstable age that just outright kills them? Though most agreed with the execution, those who were against outsider involvement to begin with now felt even stronger in their case. Now they argued, Denis is killing itself for the sake of the outsiders. Wait, what outsiders do they mean? In 4826, Damath was rewarded for his efforts pertaining to the acceptance policies of the major guilds. The first of the Guild of Stonemasons' non-paying members headed the effort to devise early fusion compounding technology, a building block for the eventual development of Nara. Oh, so like they sort of alchemically fused compounds to make Nara. Damath praised the guild and the numerous opportunities that all citizens of Denis now had to benefit their society. So essentially, one of the kids that wouldn't have otherwise been able to go into the Guild of Stone Masons ended up being one of their best. In 4843, at the age of 305, Damath passed away, leaving the throne to his firstborn son. Some argued that G didn't make the choice of Damath, but that Grand Master Imas of the Guild of Maintainers made it. The matter was never officially settled, although most contribute the choice to G. Oh, these are the annotations, the footnotes from the previous sentences. I wish that he had just written them right underneath his entries. From Damath's speech explaining to the people the findings of the council meetings. By that time, the major guilds had become extremely expensive, and large majority of the population, even if qualified to join the guilds, had no way to afford it. So the guilds were like colleges and apprenticeships and jobs. Taken from the private journals of Guildmaster Rishan of the Guild of Archivists. From Revealing the Unseen, written by Bisharan in 5999. Goshen, leader of the cult group Blood of Yafo, made the comment in his public speech. Oh, about them killing their own. The comments were made by Damath at the public announcement of the fusion compounding technology. Huh. Okay, now we have the purple book. It seems that eventually the tension became too much. Some say it drove Shamat mad. In 387 DE, both his brothers disappeared and were never found again. It was commonly presumed that Shamat wrote a death book to which both of his brothers were linked into, although it could never be proven. Regardless, it was one of the first major challenges for the people of Denis, and they reacted quickly. A prophetess was supplied to Shamat in 400 DE as an attempt to guide him to the ways of Yafo. I wonder if I should... Oh, women were generally seen as much better communicators with Yafo than men. As a result, most prophets were women. Oh, interesting. For the 155 remaining years of his reign, it seemed as though most of the people believed Shamat became a better king. The prophetess became an excellent mentor for Shamat that eventually convinced him to choose the son of one of his close friends as heir to the throne. His own children were admittedly out of control. As it turns out, it was the bloodline of that child that led to the birth of the great king years later. Shamat died of natural causes at the age of 299. The choosing of the prophetesses as guides for the king started with Shamat and became a tradition for the remaining kings of Denis. It was usually up to the king as to which prophet or prophetess he would seek for wisdom. Oh wow, that's interesting. Learning more about the Denis. So they have like a little bed here. A lot of journals and a lot of hats. Oh, hey. That's the falling man. Is that Mysterium? That's probably like a frisbee from Mysterium 2000. Wow, that's so cute. I always want to go to Mysterium at like some point. It was a shame because there was actually one in Boston where Wander's family lived, and that would have been excellent to go to. I wonder if this actually will do anything for me. No? Aw, man. Check this out. I know the DRC doesn't want us to touch these, but I bet Watson would like to know how these register with the doors, too. It makes no sense. And don't lose it. I could barely get it off the wall when I did. It was pretty scary. Maybe the weirdest thing is that I went back later. The cloth that I got this piece from was intact again. Nick. Wow, so they replaced themselves? The journey fabrics? And there's another DRC hat. Wow, there are so many notes. Where the heck is my book? And why did someone take it in the first place? Nick. So this is a letter from Dr. Watson to Matthew. The last batch of papers you sent were very interesting. Since you did such a good job, I have another list I'd like you to divvy out to the team. How you do it is up to you. 1, I'd like some more information on family life, ceremonies, etc. Anything related to birth, marriage, cultural events. I know we have quite a bit of source material for this, so anything you can get would be helpful. I think we've gathered quite a bit of science and technology and not enough about the personal lives of these people. 2, we have quite a bit of guild information, but gathering all that up into one tidy area would be nice. 3, the fall is still an obvious area that we are lacking. I'm not sure I can help you with research materials, but given the latest information that we are getting, at some time we are going to have to dig into this. I recommend assigning someone the sole task of the fall. Continue on with the kings. A short synopsis of all the kings would be helpful, following the form you started with the last batch. 5, we still have religious writings we need to translate. These are going to be the most difficult, but I think they can give us large amounts of helpful information. 6, we have a stack of journals from various Ni residences, etc., not to mention ages. I think that will be more than enough for now. Again, thank your team and tell them that they are doing great work. Dr. Watson. So I wonder what these DRC books are. King Karath. Oh, these are nice, digestible 3-page things. King Karath took the throne in 6,731 D at the age of 54. Karath is probably the most well-known name of all the kings, not because he was necessarily considered the best, but because he was the last. His name came to represent all the kings in later years, including the renaming of the Arch of the Kings and the Arch of Karath. His mother had raised him to follow the teachings of Gish, and by the time he took the throne, he was believed to be the wholehearted believer in the followers. Because of that, and the experience of watching his father interact with his advisors, Karath had decided from an early age that king was no longer the correct way the Dini should be led. At least, he argued, not until the true great king would come. The fact that Karath, in a single reign, was able to convince his people that the way that they had ruled for thousands of years was wrong and should be changed should be considered nothing short of miraculous. Karath carefully crafted his arguments with a benefit for the guilds more than anything else. After all, he argued, Dini is the guilds. Let us be protected by their fortress and ruled by their wisdom. Oh, okay, so it's like a space. It was hard for the guilds not to support a proposal that removed the king from the highest authority and replaced it with the 5 lords. Lords that would automatically be chosen from the Grand Masters of the guilds. It gave all the power to Dini to the guilds, and there were only a few Grand Masters who seemed to disagree. Those few were known as faithful followers of the great king and Rinaref, who had always supported the role of kings. Fortunately for Karath, though his people believed a variety of different philosophical ideologies, only those who faithfully followed the original teachings of Rinaref and the great king were disturbed by the thought of no king. And it was the majority of Dini that no longer followed these beliefs, but instead chose those of Nemea, Gish, the Watcher, and various others. As a result, it was a cultural impact that the public had to overcome and not a religious one. Karath, attempting to further please the guild, recommended new renovations and additions to the council chamber and construction of a new guild hall, meant to celebrate the new power that would be theirs. a symbol of the new power of the guilds of lords, made and further insult to the great king, burying his memory even further under government construction. Construction began in 6970 DE on the new guild hall. There was no better symbol of the attitude of the Dini. The tomb of the great king was further buried under a massive building dedicated to government and guilds. By the end of his... so they were hiding anything of Rhinaref. By the end of his reign, Karath had convinced a majority of Dini of his own beliefs. Most claimed to be followers of Gish and his writings, and most viewed the outsiders as a threat. If not now, then soon, Karath often said. After his death, Karath's words would be proven true with the onset of the Myst War. Outside factions invaded with attempts to destroy the ink-making and book-making guilds, and almost succeeded. By the time the war would end, there would be few left who did not follow Gish, and thus believe in the end of most outsider involvement. The discovery that conservative factions had led to the start of the Myst War would come much later, when it was far too late to alter the conservative trends. So they're having, like, conservatives that dislike outsiders, and they actually instigated the conflict that seemed to point to the outsiders being an issue when they were the ones that maybe instigated the fight in the first place. Regardless, in 6977 DE, Karath abdicated the throne and gave over power of the kings to the first 5 lords of Dini history. They were Lord Teri of the Guild of Messengers, Lord Hemela of the Guild of Healers, Lord Moleth of the Guild of Caterers, Lord Kedri of the Guild of Writers, and Lord Coronen of the Guild of Analysts. Karath died 8 years later. The time of the kings was over. Taken from Karath's public speech, where he first proposed the idea, and from the first 5 written by Tarvis in 7000. Oh, so they stopped having kings long after Rhinaref, and it was because they desperately wanted to keep out outsiders. King Me-Amen, well, this guy must have been before if the other dude was last king, took the throne in 5240 DE at the age of 83. One of the biggest announcements of Me-Amen's reign came rather quickly and was offered by the Guild of Miners and Stonemasons, who had worked together. In 5307, they revealed Nara, as it had been created in a laboratory weeks earlier. Nara offered tremendous opportunities for mining and construction. It ended up having a massive impact on future opportunities for Dini. Even at the time of its release, there was apparently much excitement about its potential. In 5312 DE, disease broke out in the industrial district of Dini, most likely originating from the age of Yesefe. Oh, let's see, a metallic gray stone, 30 times the density of steel, and the hardest of all Dini stones. That's what Nara is. Yesefe was mostly forest and provided Dini with a good portion of its wood supply, including the very expensive and rare Yima. The outbreak caused widespread panic, as many predicted another plague similar to what had occurred during the 2100s. Unfortunately, the illness was not nearly as lethal as the aforementioned, and the Guild of Healers reacted extraordinarily fast in finding a cure. Regardless, it was again a new push to at least separate the Nehwaril district far away from the city proper. Oh, so a segregation of the working class and the nobles? Me-Amen apparently liked the idea quite a bit and encouraged the surveyors to begin looking into such an expansion. In 5359 DE, the Dini received another great reason to begin major expansion, and it came in the form of a stone tooth. It was the second of the great diggers, and quite a bit more powerful and technologically more advanced than the older Stone Eater. Oh, so these are digging machines. Me-Amen immediately ordered the Guild of Miners to begin clearing an area, along with Stone Eater, for a new industrial district replacing Nehwaril. It was not until 5475 DE the actual construction was begun in the new industrial section, Uran. Less than 100 years after Stonetooth, in 5473, the Guild of Maintainers announced the newly discovered Duretheni could be used to create much improved and much more protective maintainer suits. Though such an announcement may have seemed especially important, the new suits ended up having a great impact on D'ni culture. Since the maintainers were able to take bigger risks with the types of ages they could explore, the Guild of Writers were allowed to be a bit more liberal in their writing, and a new breed of age was begun. So they created even more fantastic ages, and the maintainers could venture into them without perishing. Okay, the industrial district was formed during the reign of Nidra and served as an importation center for most outside goods. Newer ages allowed for much more experimentation with atmosphere, animal life, and energy sources. During Me'amen's reign, words became a common topic of discussion, and attention was again given to older temples. Evidence points to numerous remodels and renovations of many of the secular temples that had been built years earlier on the new line of the Great Zero. It seems that Me'amen himself paid little attention to the religious pulse of his people, being much more interested in technological advancements and city expansion to care. Once Me'amen felt the Stone Eater and Stone Tooth were no longer needed, he recommended using them to build an underground tunnel connecting the island to the city proper, and minimizing the need for boat travel. His proposition was not embraced by any means, especially the upper classes who were living on the island. Apparently, there were a number of protests for fear that the effects of the tunnel would have on the island. The proposal was also rejected by most of the guilds, causing Me'amen not to force it. I think Atrus's grandfather was considered noble, and he had actually dwelled on the island of Kavir. So I wonder if that's the island, or if the island housed more of them. I don't know. In 5500 DE, the first imports from the other ages were linked into the new Uran district, much further from the city. Uran was said to be a tremendous improvement over the old Nehoril, and much more advanced and much safer, and there was a tremendous celebration on the day of its opening. Security was tight in the new district, and it was revealed later that the Relima, it looks like Relima, I don't know, I'm never going to pronounce that right, had uncovered a variety of plots intended to display some of the factions' disagreement with the district. In 5540 DE, Me'amen's only son became extremely ill and ended up passing away 6 months later. As a member of the Guild of Healers, Ashem was often amongst the first to investigate new ages to make sure of their safety in relation to disease. As a result of his death, the age was not approved until a cure could be found. Me'amen considered the actions of his son heroic and changed the name of the Uran district to Ashemen a year after his death. It was said that the death left Me'amen deeply saddened and devoid of the excitement he had shown throughout his reign. Many said it forced him to the prophetess Trisari. From the journals of the prophetess Trisari. Okay. Me'amen apparently spent much time with Trisari in his last days and was able to die a content man because of her. Me'amen died in 5549 DE at the very ripe age of 392 and chose his nephew, probably on the recommendation of Trisari, to succeed him. So more info from the Great Kings. And then we have more books. This will just be another book reading episode. This is Sam on King Naigen. Or maybe it's like Negan. It sounds so much like Negan, the villain of The Walking Dead right now. Took the throne in 2356 DE at the age of 86. Negan did much to encourage the growth of the major guild of 5 fine artists, as well as seeking the other truths. The year 2500 DE, 1,000 years after the death of the Great King, would mark the peak of what some would call the religious confusion. There were over 2,000 registered sects, and the original beliefs of Rhinaref were known by very few. Negan was clearly not one of them. Something is something DE that, it's 2397 DE that most officially marks the start of the D'ni Renaissance. Oh, okay. of that year, the Myst Theatre Company hosted the first play written by the playwright Yore. The play dealt with the Pento War and the great king himself, and was one which Negen praised. It ended up being sold out for 3 straight weeks. Oh, so that's it. It is just a tiny little scribble. It ended up being sold out for 3 straight weeks, and marked not only the start of the theater as a popular entertainment source within the culture, but also the beginning of the Pento War subject, which would go on to become one of the most dealt with topics of their history and in their art. In 2480, the 33-year-old musician Irem began selling out concert halls, marking the beginning of yet another career of one of the great Denis artists. His music also dealt much with the great king, many times ridiculing him. Negen praised his people for being able to express their true feelings in such wonderful displays of art. So this king did not like the great king, and was encouraging singers to put him down. In 2488 DE, the first successful extrusion tests were carried out by the Guild of Miners, and to great applause from the public, Negen used the occasion to benefit everyone. He appointed the Guild of Miners as a major guild, replacing the Guild of Fine Artists. He then split the Guild of Fine Artists into the minor guilds of sculptors, artists, actors, and musicians. The split was to encourage growth in something? Mining? How's that supposed to be? As well as the arts. Oh, I see. 2 major causes that Negen throughout his reign. His proposal was strongly supported by Yore and Irem, as well as those artists who viewed as an excellent opportunity for the growth of their respective fields. In 2500 DE, Negen proposed the construction of a new council chamber for the guilds. Somewhat surprising was that he suggested that it would be built over the tomb of the great king. The proposal was met with little opposition, and construction began 2 years later. In 2502 DE, the tomb of the great king was barely visible, a tremendous symbol of what Denis had become. Later, it was discovered that within the council chamber was a massive vault, protected by puzzles of a sort. Ooh. The tomb had always been known for its patterns, some of which were claimed to have prophetic messages. Negen apparently became enamored with the patterns and spread them throughout the unseen portions of the chamber, as well as the scene. Though the public knew very little of the vault at the time of its construction, years later it was found to contain a tremendous amount of royal wealth, something Negen often publicly encouraged. Of course, most were not able to save the amounts Negen did. Oh, okay, but still the idea of saving one's money for future generations was strongly encouraged by him. Negen died in 2533 DE at the age of 263. Well, that's pretty young, leaving the throne to his 3rd son. In memorial to Negen, Yore wrote another of the more popular of his plays entitled Our Great King. It was the first play performed by the Minor Guild of Actors in 2535 DE. Oh, the official church registered a complaint, but there was little heart behind it. Apparently, even a prophetess of Negen had supported the proposition of building the temple over it. Interesting. King Asamlef. Huh. Wow, this guy has a lot of pages dedicated to him. Okay. He took the throne in 5990 at the age of 54. Asamlef inherited a people who were philosophically confused, the Watcher versus Gish versus the Great King, Tavar, but technologically advancing. Many great construction, mining, and scientific inventions, expanding within the cavern at a great rate and moving forward toward diminishing the involvement of the outsiders. Within their culture as well, the fighting that had scarred their past was at a minimum. Asamlef continued the peaceful trends by attempting to isolate no one, but instead welcoming everyone in any beliefs that they might have had. It seems he took no stance on any of the varying religious ideological beings passed around, and allowed any and all religious factions all equal access to property, government, help, etc. While disregarding no beliefs, he was also able to hold his own. some of which were unknown to Denis up to that point. Though never stated publicly by Asimlef, common opinion and historical records point towards numerous servants being used by Asimlef, most brought from outside ages. More so were the apparent challenges Asimlef held with these servants. Details are hard to find, but it seems as though these challenges range from hunts by Asimlef himself to gladiator-style battles between the servants. Ooh, so he welcomed outsiders and all beliefs, but then in secret he was having servants that were essentially slaves that he would hunt down in like human hunts and have them fight for gladiator matches? Ugh. It should be noted that regardless of what actions occurred, there was little public outcry against them. Instead of philosophical or religious beliefs, Asimlef instead focused on mining expansion, construction of the new districts, and offering equal opportunities of culture and social benefits to all classes. As far as outside involvement, Asimlef publicly argued that the order from which his father to all the guilds was not realistic. Oh, so he was the son of someone else. And that outside involvement would always be needed to some extent. Knowing the comment would anger some of the factions, he became the first king to publicly invite the more extreme factions who wanted no outside involvement to his palace for numerous talks on the issues. Though no decisions were made in the meetings themselves apparently calmed the factions and created a better overall feeling that the two would come to a decision in the future. Around the time, 2 key writers from the Writers Guild left to join the Writers of Yafo. Up to that point, the group, who believed it was their duty to write the perfect age, had been relatively small. Like the Writers of Yafo, most of the popular factions or cults of the day focus on Yafo in one way or another. The old cults, such as the tree and the sacred stone. Oh wait, we heard of Yeesha talk about the tree. Had vanished for the most part, leaving way to disagreements on the beliefs of the Yafo for the most part. Wait, maybe the sacred stone is what pops up in the next game. There's a stone that the Bahra like. Asimlef passed away in 6,284 DE at the age of 339, leaving the throne to his third and youngest son. The Writers of Yafo would eventually become one of the 3 largest sects in all Denis. After the Judgment Age, most of Denis believed one would either end up in the Perfect Age or Jakuth's Age. Oh, maybe Jakuth is sort of like the devil. Obviously, most wanted to live in the Perfect Age, but there were, of course, a variety of beliefs on how that was accomplished. So it's like maybe they're heaven or hell. And the last book. Sam. Oh, he made it with that. King Alesh. Oh, little faces down there. King Alesh. Alesh took the throne in coronation ceremonies in the year 120 DE at the age of 170. Although it seems Alesh had never been a member of the Writers Guild in Gardernay, he had spent the first 50 years of his life with Rhinaref after his own dismissal, working on the Book of Denis. When the Denis Writers Guild was formed in the year 8 DE, Rhinaref made sure Alesh was placed in charge of the first Grand Master of the guild. As Grand Master, he had worked closely with Rhinaref in the writing of the new Guild of Writers' Oath. The oath, which was what every member promised to live by, ended up staying in existence, with few minor changes until 9400 DE. Records indicate that Alesh modeled his life very closely to Rhinaref's. He refused to build himself a palace until a common library was opened, as he strongly supported a place where all citizens would have access to books. Though there was some minor disagreement on minor issues, the building was eventually finished in 233 DE, although, like his mentor, Alesh still refused to build himself a palace. The reign of Alesh was extremely similar to that of Rhinaref. There was still a great excitement for the new ideas and laws of Denis, and thus great support for Alesh, making his reign a very smooth one. Before his third son was born in 256 DE, records indicate that there was a bit of public apprehension over who the next king would be. Eilish's two eldest sons were fairly rebellious, and neither seemed good candidates for the throne, at least in the public's opinion. However, as Eilish's third son grew, it became apparent to the public, although records never give specific reasons, that the boy closely followed his father's ideals. Eilish must have agreed with the public opinion, as it was his third son who he selected to succeed him. Eilish died of natural causes at the age of 350. Yes! We finally completed all the books. So, yeah, we learned Did I read these books? I don't think I read these books. Marriage? Cyan. The manhole. Whoa. This is all about marriage? Okay. More Denis lore time. I might just make this into one long episode. Marriage. Marriage. Nah, that's marriage. Much more than modern cultures, within Denis cultures, all citizens were expected to marry. In fact, it was even believed that marriage was an important part of a relationship with Yavo, as it taught and revealed the necessary requirements for such a relationship. Both marriage relationships and the relationship with Yavo were described by the same Denis word, Taigon. Or Tagon. Maybe it's Tagon. Literally translated, the word means to love with the mind, and implied a deep understanding, respect, and most importantly, unselfish love for one another. Obviously, the religious influence in most of Denis culture was very strong, and as a result, marriage was not something taken lightly. It was considered a lifetime commitment, and for a Denis who could live up to 300 years old, it was obviously not a decision that Denis felt should be rushed into, and it seems as though it rarely was. Some records point to rare arranged marriages, although for the most part it seems that the decision was up to individuals. Marriage was not permitted before the age of 25, and marriage between blood relatives was strictly forbidden. Though allowed, marriage between the classes was looked down upon. Marriage to other worlders was particularly unheard of, well, practically unheard of. I found certain writings from 9000s going so far as to call the mixing of Denis blood with outside cultures as a travesty, while others wrote such a child who marries an outsider was better off dead. Oof. Well, Atrus married an outsider, Gen married an outsider, but I suppose that's because, they were mixed bloods too. Their own mother and grandmother was a human. The marriage ceremony itself was not a single-day event, but one that took over 5 days. Attendance to those sections of the ceremony to which one was invited was extremely important, and it was considered a disgrace to be invited and not attend. The event usually began with a small ceremony held in the evening before the first day of the marriage ceremony. The ceremony always took place at the home of the groom, or his parents, and was meant to confirm both the bride and the groom's decision to unite. To be united to one another in front of their immediate family. The groom presented his bride-to-be with a gift, representing the confirmation of his choice. The acceptance of the gift by a bride-to-be was acknowledgement of her decision. Immediately after her acceptance of the gift, the bride-to-be was escorted away with her family, and not to be seen by her groom until the joining ceremony that would take place on the 5th day. Wow, so a guy approaches his bride-to-be, asks her to marry him. She goes, yeah, I'll take your gift. And then she's whisked off for 5 days. The first day was meant for the bride and groom to spend time with their families. As they were starting their own family, their old family would no longer be their highest priority. Thus, the day was set aside to spend time with that original family. Traditionally, the day ended with a large meal, as well as speeches and blessings from the parents to their child. The second day was set aside for the bride and groom to spend with friends, both married and unmarried. Traditionally, one of the friends would host a large dinner at the end of the day. Oh, so that's sort of like a best man or oh, come on. Maid of honor. What am I thinking? The third day was reserved for spending time with the soon-to-be in-laws. Whoa, that must be super awkward. It was on that day that the bride and groom received blessings from their in-laws, as well as other members of the family. Again, there was a traditional larger meal at the end of the day, marked by speeches from the eventual in-laws and other soon-to-be family members. So without their significant other, they would spend an entire day in dinner with their in-laws and their in-laws' extended family. That's interesting. The fourth day was meant for the couple to spend time alone with Yavo individually. Though many apparently viewed this day as for formality, others viewed it as the most significant of all the days. The day was often filled with prayer, asking for Yavo's blessings upon the event, as well as time to understand Yavo's desires for their new lives together. It was also considered a time to purify themselves before Yavo. Some chose to spend time with priests or prophets, while others read the holy books and talked to him himself. To Yavo himself. The fifth day was the day of joining. The early portion of the day was set aside for physical preparation, while the latter part of the day was set aside for the joining ceremony itself. For those who did not have access to private ages, the ceremony usually took place on marriage ages. For the upper classes, the ceremony took place in family ages. All family was expected to attend, as were fellow guild members. So, guild members were like co-workers. All of those in attendance were divided into two sides. One side represented the groom, while the other side represented the bride. This sounds very much like an earth wedding. Between the two sides, in the center, was a long aisle and a triangular podium. The bride and groom would each approach their side of the podium by walking through their respective family and friends. It was, after all, those families and friends who had made the bride and groom what they were, and the Denis believed it was those family and friends who should present their bride and groom to their spouse. The priestess usually stood at the third side of the podium. As with most important events, and especially marriage, the bride and groom wore the bracelets that they had been given at birth as well. What? They were given birth bracelets? As well as maturity. Oh, so they got a bracelet for when they were born and a bracelet for when they became adults? After the bride and groom arrived at the platform, the father of the bride would remove the bride's bracelets and give them to the groom. The Denis believed the giving of the bracelets represented the giving of the bride's purity and adulthood to the groom. A short speech often followed the event. The father of the groom would follow the father of the bride with the identical procedure, giving his son to the bride. The giving of the children was followed by an expression of both parents of their blessings upon being joined, as well as all those present. Symbolically, the bride and groom then switched sides to represent an acceptance of all the bride's family and friends, and of the groom and vice versa. Both the bride and the groom then handed all 4 bracelets to the priestess. Oh. While the priestess led the couple through their commitments to one another and Yavo, the bride and groom placed their hands upon the podium. During the commitments, the couple made promises to one another and followed by the promises of Yavo. All were recited aloud to the priestess. The priestess usually reminded the couple that their marriage was a reminder of Tagon, to know with the mind, and that their love should always be a representation of their love for Yavo. Following the commitments, the priest would place 2 new and larger bracelets upon the bride and groom. The groom's was placed upon the left wrist, and the bride the right wrist. The new bracelets were meant to represent both the purity and maturity bracelets their spouse had previously worn. The Denis emphasized the spouse was now your responsibility to keep pure and knowledgeable of good and evil. The bracelets were meant to be a constant reminder of that responsibility, as well as a commitment to maintain the best for that spouse. So they're like rings. After the new bracelets were placed upon the wrists, the hands of the bride and groom were wrapped together with a tight cord, covering their wrists and hands completely. Oh, that's like what you would find with a lot of other rituals. I think maybe like Jewish or Christian ones. Upon completion, the priest placed a ring upon the pinky of each free hand. Oh, they did get rings. The rings were symbolic reminders of the entire ceremony and placed upon the 5th finger to represent the joining that took place on the 5th day. The priestess would then usually remove herself from the podium so the couple could take her place. Together, that couple then walked down the aisle between the 2 parties and toward the far end of the aisle, where a glass of wine waited for them. Before drinking, the couple knelt and prayed together. After the prayer, they each drank from the cup, and the 2 sides of the hall merged to one group, often with great celebration. They were now considered joined, and the celebration could begin. Families usually fed all in attendance and was typically dancing and music. The couple was expected to keep their hands united throughout the night as a reminder that they were now joined in both the eyes of man and Yafo. The binding of the hands was apparently meant to be somewhat troublesome, symbolizing that there would be difficult times in their relationship, but that those times did not affect the fact that they were now joined. Following the celebrations, tradition was for the couple to embrace the priestess, to touch a linking book to them, so that they would both link to a vacation or honeymoon type age. Though these vacations were usually short, it was not unusual for the man to not work up for a year in order to build the new marriage. I should also note that the cord used to join the couple's hands together was also viewed as a sacred item. It seems as though various couples used the cords in a variety of different ways, some using them for necklaces, and others hanging them in their house. That's interesting. So it was very similar to earth marriages. Maturity. Similar to a variety of other cultures, the Denis celebrated a child's entrance into reason and maturity. The Denis believed that true maturity, or the age of reason as they called it, was achieved at the age of 25. Before that, the Denis believed that children's minds and hearts were not properly formed. Up until that time, they even went so far as to say it was impossible for a child to truly make a correct decision, as they were too easily controlled by the other motives. It did not mean that what they did was not right or wrong, but the Denis believed that Yavo did not hold them accountable for their decisions. Up to that point, it was apparently up to the parents to judge and protect, and thus, another reason society encouraged couples to only have one child at a time under 25. That's interesting. So that means that they would wait 25 years before having another child? I mean, for us, that would be a whole other lifetime, at least young adult lifetime. That'd be much too far a difference. I mean, if you were having, say, your first child at 25 and your second child at 50, that would be way too much. But for Denis, because they had such long lives, yeah, they could possibly manage it. For us, that would be like having children 18 years apart. Wow. In the ceremony of readiness, the Denis celebrated a child's entrance into reason and maturity. At the ceremony, the child was presented with a bracelet of knowledge, also translated maturity. So that's one of the two bracelets. I have to admit the translation is somewhat poor and makes it sound like a magical or superstitious item, something it did not sound like to them. In fact, it was a fairly serious item. The Denis viewed the bracelet as a sign of accountability. The individual, once given the bracelet, was expected to be responsible for his or her actions, and she had true knowledge of good and evil and the wisdom to make the right choices between both. Associated with the bracelet were certain rights as well as expectations that they were to behave in the correct manner. From a religious standpoint, the ceremony of readiness signaled accountability to Yavo as well as the Denis citizens. No longer were parents judged for the actions of their children on a religious level, and no longer was lack of knowledge an excuse to Yavo. The Maker, they believed, now expected much more of them. Though the age of reason was 25, the Denis did not consider true wisdom to come until much later. With not nearly the fanfare that the age of reason brought, at 125 years of age, there was another celebration for reaching the age of wisdom. Perhaps most importantly, regarding that status, the Denis were allowed to become the highest ranks as teachers or leaders, grandmasters or lords. The same rules applied to women, and no woman under the age of 125 was technically allowed to advise, especially to the kings. Oh, so that means only old women could become prophetesses? As well, it appears that a woman's fertility ended around the age of 125. Whoa, so if they had children 25 years apart, that means they would only be able to have at most 5 children in their lifetime. And even then, that's pretty steep. So 125 must be their version of 50. During the time of the kings, advisors were required for those kings who were under the age of 125, as the king himself had not achieved the age of wisdom. The great king Alcindor was the only king who did not have an official advisor, even though he was under the age of wisdom for the majority of his reign. Oh, so they always had an advisor, a prophetess, to help with their decision making up until they had reached 125. Interesting. The class system. This is by Trisha. It seems as though my first inclination towards class structure was incorrect. Though early on there was little in the way of class society, such a high ideal faded quickly. By 9400 DE, there were 7 very distinct classes. The elites. The lords and the grand masters of the major guilds. It was possible for private citizens to be accepted, but if so, abundant resources were needed. It was only the elite who owned private libraries of books and private islands. Quite a few obvious attempts to reach out and unify the classes, although I'm not sure it did much good. Common libraries, major guild scholarships, renovation of the poor districts all seemed more political than life-changing. Not surprising, I suppose. Guild members. Yes, it was possible for the lower classes to attend, but it seems that by the end the schools were far too expensive and prestigious to allow for such. As a result, the graduates became a class among themselves, and a very high one at that. So that's essentially saying college graduates. The upper class, the lowest of the 3 higher classes. Such citizens had succeeded in private enterprise and most likely provided the elite with banks, pubs, etc. No major guild education for the most part, but enough money to buy their way into the upper classes. So these are like entrepreneurs. The middle class, mostly shop owners and the like, able to afford some luxuries of the denier, but still considered far from the elite. Rare, but possible, for them to own books as well as private ages, seem to make up most of the minor guild enrollment. High poor. The higher class of poor seem to be mostly of industrial workers, many of whom spent their time on foreign ages, before it was outlawed, of course. So I suppose they would go and gather resources from the other ages. It seemed that this class, along with the lower 2, did not own books. The low poor. I can't seem to find a better name for them. However, it seems clear that there were 2 classes of poor. These low poor were relegated to their own districts and rarely even seen even with the middle class, and never with the upper classes, possibly used as servants, although that was generally looked down upon. Sublow? Reference to the least, an undefined subclass, are found on very rare occasions, not enough data to elucidate. The least. That's who Yeesha was referring to in that letter that was left in the cleft a long time ago. Maybe that refers to the Bahro? And pregnancy. Oh, great. By Trisha. Pregnancy. Now, this is surprising. I can't say for sure, but it seems fairly clear that denier women were only fertile for 1 denier day every 2 denier months. Whoa. In surface terms, that's roughly only 30 hours every 72 days. If true, it explains quite a few things. First, why there were so few children for a people who lived 300 years. And secondly, the reason behind the rather large celebrations of pregnancy. As far as I can tell, these celebrations were usually limited to family members, although were rather large. There was quite a bit of prayer to Yavo, as well as blessings from family members. These blessings usually included vows to care for the pregnant woman and child through the coming months. As I have mentioned in other areas, pregnant women were believed to be much more insightful, and as a result, as part of the pregnancy experience, although not part of the official ceremony, was using that insight to gain a revelation from Yavo. Though there is quite a bit of religious meditation expected of women during this time, I won't go into it there. However, this meditation was expected to primarily guide the woman to her child's future and its purpose, and was taken rather seriously. While pregnancy within marriage was cause for great celebration, the same cannot be said of pregnancy outside of marriage. As far as I can tell, any woman who became pregnant was expected to immediately marry, and any child conceived out of wedlock was unable to join a guild for its entire life. As well, no revelation was expected from such a mother. This was as equivalent a curse to a lower class woman as her child would not be able to attend a guild of the upper class. Oh, yeah. As far as I can see, gestation was a full year. 10 Denis months. 290 Denis days, equivalent to 1 Earth year. I have found no records of multiple births. And now we're done with the journals. Woo! So we've learned about their kings, their politics, their marriage, their birth, okay. We've learned a lot about the Denis people.